Ooh. Ugh, man. Yay, we did it. Hello, everybody in the world, and welcome to episode number 2 of Next to the Floor. My name is Harrison. I'm one of your hosts with the most. I'm joined by my good friend Gary Knox Dairy and our incredibly special guest joining us all the way from, the same town that we're both in, Boston. We've got Bjorn.
Hello.
Who happens to also be a ballroom dance instructor, an incredible break dancer and b-boy. In his spare time, he's got a rap career as well, a very storied past and history, and that's really exciting. And I'm super honored and pleased to have you on the show with us here today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Bjorn. What's your deal? Who are you? Who is Bjorn?
I mean, isn't that like the point of all of this? Finding that out, right?
Yes.
Well, freshly into my 38 years of life, and I don't know, I guess like if I started, I'm born and raised in Boston. Moved around a lot, went to the military right after high school, did some traveling, lived in a few different parts of the country, and found my way back to Boston. I've kind of worked, wherever. I worked at a law firm when I first came back for about a decade. I worked in the hospital field for a little bit. I was trying to do like tons of little entrepreneurial things in the middle. So I was just kind of bouncing around, and, now I've been back in Boston for a good while, and still, building in the breakdance and hip hop world. I'm more proficient in a dance called rock dancing, which is like the parent, you would say, of breakdancing. It's like that same energy, but from the late 60s, early 70s. And, found Arthur Murray years and years ago, and, finally made my connection with the Boston office, and have been here for 2 years. It's the best job I've ever had, best crew of coworkers and friends I've ever gotten the pleasure to work around. So feeling really blessed to just kind of be in this atmosphere.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here and willing to share with us your insight. I know I had mentioned this a little bit last week on the show that you and I had a conversation, and actually a very pleasant conversation, which for a lot of our viewers at home, they all think that, we hate each other. It's true. I honestly don't know. Well, I'll full disclosure for everyone in the universe who's watching, Bjorn and I are actually really good friends. I don't know when it was. It was sometime within like the first year of you working. So like last year. It's scary to think that you've only been working with us for 2 years.
Oh, but it's his 2-year timeout. It's his 2-year anniversary at the studio soon.
Yeah.
But I think at one point during last year, you and I were just talking, and we're like, how funny would it be if it was just like, we just started a feud with each other for no reason. Like we just like started feuding, and for some weird, bizarre reason that just kind of caught on.
It did.
And so now I think our boss actually thinks we hate each other. She knows that we don't, but It's the Newman, and it wasn't Seinfeld. Who was the other guy?
Kramer.
Was it Kramer who didn't like Newman?
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, George Costanza.
I forget.
Doesn't matter. That's beside the point. So anyway, that's our relationship in the studio, but we're actually really good friends. And I think Bjorn's one of the coolest, smartest guys that I will ever meet in my entire life. And I'm going to say that out there on the internet. But we were having this really, you heard it here first, everyone. It's on the internet, so it's forever.
That's it.
So
There
we were having a conversation last week, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you onto the show is because, you know, you're a Black man with dreads in the ballroom world, which comes with obviously its own challenges.
Sure.
I know you've already, like, in your 2 years, like starting to work as an instructor and then like becoming a competitive dancer as well, have already had to experience some of the baggage that comes along with that. So I was excited to get your experiences with that, and talk a little bit more about what we were talking about last week, which was like effectively kind of like color theory, but not like color theory in the, you know, the art
Right. Like kind of sort of
mode of things, but like color theory within the context of like referring to people as color.
Right. Did you get a chance to discuss that with Gary at all?
So, well, no. So I literally just like brought it up kind of casually in conversation, but I figured I would wait until you got here to be able to talk about it, because it was really, really thought provoking, and figured it would be a really cool thing to share with our audience.
Definitely.
For them to think about as well. So, you know, tell us more.
I mean, obviously I've been here 2 years, not like the longest time in the world. I think we've done like 3 competitions at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely notice a different energy inside of the ballroom world when it gets to that level, obviously, because everybody's, you know, kind of like neck and neck. The most standout thing is just something like, you know, I'm a person with long hair and we have to wear numbers, and just making the adjustment so it's like, you know, they can see your number all the time and things. That started to make me realize like, okay, there's a whole different type of focus here than I'm used to, you know? So I've just kind of been trying to humble myself and just take it all in as it comes. But Gary Harrison and I were talking the other day, because I was telling him when you were bringing up the podcast to me, I was talking to Rachel, and one of the instructors in our studio, about it. And I was telling her about this exercise that I've been doing with people for like, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 months. I forget what the initial spark was, but something similar to everything that's happening now, something like George Floyd happens. And then it's kind of like one of those rude awakenings where, whether you were one of the people that was very aware of the situations that are amiss, or you're somebody that was like, no, this never happens or something, it's something that forces everybody to just be focused on the same thing at once. And then, especially in today's age with the hashtags, people group together a lot based off of titles and things like that. And it tends to separate, you know, before people even readily try to solve whatever the initial thing was. And one of the things that I've been doing with people is trying to get them to think of like what the roots even are, so that we're not caught up in the well, I feel this way and I feel this way, and it's more so how do we just like get to the root and get it out of there. And so I would say, like to ask you, for example, if you thought of, say we were talking about the Method Man, the rapper from the Wu-Tang Clan, right? What
Mhm.
race would you say that he is? Like if somebody was like, who? Method Man, you're describing them, you're gonna be like, well, he's this. What would you say? Just
I mean, I would definitely like, well, it African, you know, but like what people don't see is like, you know, they don't see what he's doing, you know, and so, and like, I would like, ask me that question again, and I want you to go a little bit deeper about it.
well, so like when you say deeper, what do you mean? Do you mean like what am I asking or
Yeah, like, of course yeah, he is black, but like, you
yeah.
know, hmm
I mean, honestly, that's like as deep as well, for the moment, we go that deep, right? So say we go to
Stage
like,
one, we go there.
stage one, like we're here now. Let's say Saddam Hussein. If somebody was like, brought up Saddam Hussein and somebody's like, who's that? And you're saying, well, he was this blank man. How would you describe Saddam Hussein's background?
Middle Eastern,
Yeah.
yeah.
So like, I feel I always say this before the next part because I'm like, everybody normally says the same exact answers, right? Like, regardless of the people I pick, it's like the first person is, so I've used Barack Obama, I've used Michelle, Oprah, just throwing names out, right? And people
Yeah.
are like, yeah, black, right? So then I'm like, I want you to know we all answer the same. So it's not like I'm attacking you specifically or anything.
hmm
But how would you describe the reason for us feeling okay saying using a color for like a specific color for certain people, but with somebody that's say like as you said, as we would all say from the Middle East, right?
yeah.
You
More.
don't
Yeah.
apply a color, or even to say like Asia, we're like the Middle East specifically, you know? So
Yeah.
I'm always like, why is it that we feel with certain people it has to be like specific
Black, black, or like,
geography
yeah.
or color, right? And what makes the difference and what makes it okay to do with certain people versus other people, you
Mm.
know?
I like that question. Like, I really don't think it's okay. I think it's like, well, it's like, it's like this. What are we? We're African Americans, right?
Yeah.
And so and then what does black mean to you?
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what's important to think about there too is that, even just, so actually I've been thinking about this question a lot. And, I think a large part of the reason why we use the word black in reference to black people is because the diaspora of black people is so vast and broad, right? So like, we had a coworker for many years, Brianna, who was deeply, deeply, deeply Haitian, like she was Haitian, right? She was black for sure, but she was Haitian, right? Versus my family, my dad's side of the family is like Southern black. They come like, we can trace our lineage. I say trace our lineage, but we can trace our lineage back to a plantation in Virginia, right? So I am an African American because I don't have roots in, I have African roots, but we don't know what they are,
Right.
right? So I think we utilize, and I often like encourage people, like society, I know this kind of might be counterproductive, but in reference to Black people, right? You know, I think Black can be a very a safe, all-encompassing term to use for people because it is a collective term, whereas like something like African American ignores the fact that there are Black people in Brazil, there are Black people in the Caribbean, there are Black people in other countries other than
Right.
continental Africa.
It's a culture. It's definitely a culture when you say it, because it's like you can be African, yeah, and then you can be Black. You know, you can be African, you can be Black in Brazil, you can be, you know, and it's definitely a culture thing. So it's that I feel like that would be my answer, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you were even one of the first people that, what did you say at first, Gary? African American? Was that the first thing you said? Most people say Black, like right off the bat. It's like, yeah, Black. And I think, like Harrison's saying, even in the safety, people find a lot of strength in it because obviously, you know, it represents at least the fighting class, you know.
Yeah.
We're looking at like, I don't know, like 100-ish years of like visible fighting. And I mean, even if you look at the Black Lives Matter, that's a thing that's now obviously but connected to, you know, all the other fights that have been happening over the last few decades.
I think the important thing to feel there within that too, and Gary had just talked about it, is that I feel like, and this is often where the ball gets dropped in a lot of conversation, is that like the word Black is very much like it's a cultural identity as well as being like a symbolism of like power against a system that was built against its existence, right? Like to be Black is to be revolutionary, is to be like radical, is to basically fight against everything that society has built. And it's if you get an opportunity, I'm gonna, you know, plug a couple of things here because, you know, we're not sponsored.
Yeah.
TBD. Not sponsored yet, but I'm going to highly recommend that people get an opportunity to watch Black is King, the new Beyonce like video album that she released on, I think it's on Disney Plus. Borrow your friend's Disney Plus account. I would like to thank Maddie Lynn, one of our coworkers, who let me steal her Disney Plus account way back at the beginning of quarantine so I could watch a couple of Disney movies and still use it from time to time. That's there. And then Michelle Obama also just started a podcast that I highly, highly, highly recommend listening to. It is phenomenal. I think it comes out on Wednesdays. I believe this past Wednesday was the first episode, but it is so good. But yeah, the Blackness it's weird because, you know, I've also been thinking about this idea a lot too, is like, not as in like playing the devil's advocate, but that argument of like, well, you know, why is it okay to like have Black power and not have white power, right? And I think the core issue with that entire concept, like that entire line of questioning, is because let's think about what the two things are, like what those two words entail, wherein you have, you know, when we say like, you know, Black is powerful, Black is important, you know, you is kind, you is smart, you is important, right? It is about uplifting a group of people, a collective group of people worldwide who have, over the course of all of history, not all of history, I don't want to, because, history, according to a lot of scientists, many scientists, and pretty much all scientists, started in Africa. But through much of history has been an oppressed class. Whereas, when you say something like white power, what that instantly brings up to you, like instantaneously. And if it doesn't bring it up to you, I would highly recommend you relook at your value system. That's not calling out people, but I'm just saying, is that it brings up, images of things like, I don't know, like the KKK or like alt-right movements and Nazism and blah, blah, blah. And so, do you want to be associated with that? Probably not.
Yeah. That's an interesting concept also. And I immediately think of, I forget, I think it was 2 weeks ago when I watched one of the gentlemen, I forget his name. He was talking about, I think what he said was representation versus tokenism or something like that. And and then you bring up other cultures and things having power in their expression too, right? But then the minute you say white power, all of our minds immediately go one place.
It's an instant focus.
But as your comments started with, why can't this be a good thing, And it's like, I think it can on an idealist level, but there's not strong representation within that, because obviously if you're destroying, you're not building. So any organization that's destroying things is clearly not representing true power, but they're representing tokenism. And in doing so,
well, I also think part of the issue in there too, and I'm gonna not argue my own point, but like argue against my own original statement, is the fact that like, I don't want to speak for all white people, but I grew up in I'm half Black. I grew up in an all white community. But the vast majority of white people that I'm familiar with don't refer to themselves as white. They refer to themselves as like, I am like, so for me, I am Black, Italian American. Until my family did an ancestry.com 23andme sort of situation, we were Italian Irish, so like even within that vast umbrella of what does it mean to be like, what does it mean to be a white person, right? I think we are very quick to instantly go to nation of origin.
Yes, right.
Whereas, and that's again, like circling back to kind of my original point, why that term Black, I think, is so important for Black people, is because for a lot of Black people, we don't have necessarily a nation of origin, or we do, but we don't know what it is because of, the transcontinental slave trade and yada, yada, yada.
And I wonder, like, are people against things like ancestry.com? Are people doing that sort of stuff? How do you guys feel? I know like one person that I can say I know this person, and they did a full DNA test. I didn't know the results, but. So
I think it's a very interesting concept. I think we as a people, right, humans, are very interested. We are very, very interested in things that happen before us, right? Like history to us, like the art of storytelling has never really truly been lost on humans, right? It just comes in different shapes and forms, right? So like, and like the new wave of storytelling, ancestry.com, 23andme, blah, 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 right? This is just like the 21st century of like the fireside telling of your ancestors.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, like, I think it's a very kind of, it's a cool thing to be able to dig into your, like, what are your roots? Because, you know, like, again, for someone like me who is from a mixed family, you know, we know for a fact that, you know, on my mother's side, her grandmother, her mother's side of the family, very, very Italian, like incredibly Italian, last name Camastra. So like Sicilian, like, you know, I'm pretty sure she was a Don in the mafia, my grandmother, Martha, God bless and rest her soul. But then my grandfather's side of the family immigrated to the United States from Ireland. But turned out, you know, through some ancestry.com 23andme sort of situation that my mom's side of the family had done, they did like a collective one and like all worked together to figure out some stuff. Turns out that my mom's side of my maternal grandfather's side is not actually Irish, but they're actually Jewish and ended up in Ireland escaping persecution from France. So they're actually French Jews who ended up in Ireland, changed their last name, started to chill with the Catholics, and then ended up in the United States. So, you know, I think there's a lot to be learned, whether it's like a fun kind of just thing for you to be like, oh, cool, I didn't know that, like, you know, I might be 0.1%, you know, Eastern Asian, you know, I think there's a cool bit of information there. But then also for the other side, that's like for people who really want to know their family history, I think that also opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah.
I think it gets really tricky and tough for Black people and people of color, because for a lot of Black people, like, our histories are lost and tied to whiteness and white families, which is okay, you know, it's okay, but it's not. But
still doesn't help when you're trying to know your past,
to know your
past and where you came from, you know, because like something like, for example, on my side, I don't know my family at all,
right?
You know,
right.
I was adopted. I came from a foster home. But I have taken a 23andMe. My SO, my significant other, Marcy. She got one from Marcy. I miss you. She's at work.
All of our sponsors should, you know, give us all the money so we can, you know, buy Marcy something really nice, because she's the greatest person on the entire planet.
Exactly, especially for handling me.
Yes. Like, if anybody needs a keeper, it is Gary Knox Dairy, and Marcy does a phenomenal job, deserves all of the awards.
Yeah. But anyways, so I actually recently did my 23andMe, because before I don't even know, you know, I was like, I'm Black, I probably come from Africa, you know? So
chances are.
Odds
are good.
Odds are good. Look, hopefully. Please not be from Germany. Please not be from but so I did it a couple years ago when I was on tour, and it was like the biggest thing too, because like I don't even know like my mom, my biological mom, any of my family. So I was like, cool, I'm gonna do this 23andMe, and I'm gonna finally reveal some of my past, you know, or where I come from. And so I got it back. And all it is like West Africa, you know, and it kind of sucks because like if you knew some of your relatives, you would be able to like do their 23andMe and then see what they get from there, and I like people like me, they don't get that at all. So it's just like,
and I think the hard thing about that too is we forget that, like, of the continents, you know, Africa being the largest, you know, what does West Africa mean?
A lot.
Right? Like, that's, you know, if you took Africa and cut it in half, like the Western half still encompasses, like, you know, a lot of stuff. Like, there are a lot of places. West Africa. Oh, okay. I mean, in my mind, of course, when I hear West African, my first thought is, Nigeria, Kenya. And I can still see a good friend of mine, his parents are from Kenya. Funniest people I've ever met in my entire life. And I've seen his dad very upset before, and I don't want to laugh, but it is the funniest thing on the entire planet. But anyway, again, West Africa, Africa being a continent, just a reminder to everyone, Africa and Asia are continents that encompass a lot of things. The Middle East is in Asia, for everyone's general understanding. If you say, they're from Asia, that doesn't mean anything because Russia is in Asia as well.
World.
So,
every time somebody says this phrase, it's a small world to me, I'm like,
where? What world are you on?
You've been to more than 4 countries.
Well,
right.
You know why? Because those type of people who say that, like, they only live in their own little world.
I call it the blocker mentality, right?
I mean, I think it's important to understand the context of that phrase. It's a small world, wherein like
it makes sense sometimes,
right? So like a perfect example of it being a small world. So, and this is like kind of wild. So many moons ago, my parents decided to go on a vacation to France. They went to Paris, as middle-aged folks do. They were just like, we're going to go to France and we're not going to take any of our kids. And I was like, okay, great. Thanks for thinking of me. Bye, parents. Love you the most. So they went to France and, they were just hanging out and they were at their hotel or whatever. And my stepfather, who one of the coolest guys on the entire planet, his name is Ike. He's got this like superpower wherein he's a middle-aged white guy, so he's got a superpower, as many do, where he just knows everyone. Like that is his superpower. He happens to know every single person on the entire planet, all 7 billion people. He knows them some way, shape, or form. So they're in Paris, halfway across the world, 6 hours ahead of us. At their hotel, and they leave their hotel to go get breakfast, and they stop at this little cafe. And while they're at this cafe, he hears somebody call his name, and he turns around, and turns out it's one of his friends from like high school or college. Wow. Just like there, and they see him. They're like, "Hey, what's going on? What are you doing? What are you doing here in Paris?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, we moved to like Austria or Germany a few years ago. And we're here, just for the weekend, because that's what we do. We just come down to Paris for the weekend." So,
vacation, yeah.
I think that's a fairly good,
just a weekend,
fairly good representation of that phrase. It's a small world, but truthfully,
right.
It's not a small world. Because remember, Africa is a continent.
Right. Remember.
In and of itself.
Have you guys put in your mind or made some plan or have some connection to going to Africa at some point, or have you been? Or
yeah, I am committed to a plan.
Nice.
I actually
Wow.
yes. So I want to there's this thing that I want to do, and I'm saving for it because it's going to be awesome. So I want to go on a tour through Africa, through all the different countries, and learn as many cultural dances as possible. So I'm gonna probably start in Egypt.
I feel like you would be there for the entire rest of your life.
Yeah, he's not coming back.
You're not coming back. Bye, Gary. Thanks for being here.
As many as I can I want to do as many as I can as much as I can take off of work type of thing.
Well, it was nice knowing you. Well, because I believe it's the case. So and I know this is not correct information, but I'm going to say it anyway, and I'm going to say it with authority, like it is true. I mean, like, you know, I know the numbers aren't correct, but I'm pretty sure before, like, you know, we've all seen, I'm sure, the movie Hotel Rwanda, and before like the Hutu Tutsi, like, basically massacre, wild
Oof.
wild time. That movie, first of all, that movie was so good, and obviously it was a real thing, so it was so terrible.
Yeah.
It was one of those like terrible, oh my gosh, the movie was just so well done. But before that, I'm pretty sure in Rwanda, there were, I want to say, upwards of like 30, 40, or like 50 some odd like self-recognized like tribes and groups of people
Mhm.
just within the country. And I know that those numbers like 30, 40, 50, it sounds a little hyperbolous, but like that's like fairly
Yeah. And
fairly accurate. Like I don't think that's like a wild approximation.
Somebody,
that's
if
not
whoever's
very
watching right now,
Right.
fact
If you're
check
in the
us. Fact
chat,
check
fact
us.
check that, because
Fact check us. Whoever's in
pretty sure
the
that
comment
that
section.
is
Also,
a
yeah.
pretty accurate statement.
Also, I forgot to mention, if you're liking, make sure to smash that. If you're watching, make sure to smash that like button and share and subscribe to
Next to the floor.
Next to the Floor, and ring that bell notification icon for live notifications whenever. Because we're posting content whenever we can, holding weekly podcasts and monthly roundtables.
Monthly roundtables. Speaking of, pause in the conversation here really quick. We're going to shameless plug, because that's truly what this podcast is about, is shamelessly plugging
everything.
Our events and other incredible Black owned businesses and things like that. Our next Ballroom Dance and Race roundtable discussion, part 3, Three Fast, 3 Furious. I've got to come up with a fun trilogy name.
Right?
Trilogy for the
man, like the Bourne Ultimatum, the Bourne trilogy, the Roundtable trilogy, is going to be August 29th, Saturday, August 29th, from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern, here on the next to the throwing my pen. Sorry, I got so excited. Next to the Floor page. Make sure you mark it on your calendars. There will be an event thing coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. And again, this podcast, Next to the Floor, hosted by, yours truly, Harrison, featuring, special guests like my arch nemesis, Bjorn, and the wicked cool cat up there, Gary, hosted from in front of our couches while we are, dealing with COVID-19. Will air every single Saturday at 6 o'clock. Whether you want it to or not, it's happening. So deal with it. But anyway, back to the conversation we were having. Gary, we're never going to see you again because, I'm pretty sure
I pop in every now and then.
Every once in a while, just like send us a message on Zoom and be like, hey, I'm here. I'm learning this dance today. Now, is your plan to like learn the dance and remember it, or is it to like just go and like learn the dance? Because I'm thinking like my students that we work with, where they're like, I want to learn this dance, and I'm like, okay, great, let's learn it, and then they walk out the door, and it's like, it's like they never even showed up. Glad you guys are here today.
So I have a solid plan of videoing, obviously, videoing everything I do. and make sure I catalog those probably potentially thousands of video clips of learning the intricacies of every different cultural dance in Africa. Well, not at every, but you know, as much as I can.
I was gonna say you probably want to start with a more like manageable goal.
Yeah,
I know.
For like 10.
10's a good number. Let's start with 10.
Good number, you know?
10.
We got 40 tribes times.
40 tribes in this one country.
How many countries?
It's more of like a plan for when I retire.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
It's more of like, I'm gonna take my ass back to Africa and tour and learn all the dances. You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean the reason
I have a little bit more time. I have a little bit more time when I'm retired too. So.
Yes.
All the time
That's
in the
fair.
world, right? I just always wonder because obviously if we ever have these talks at some point, you know, you bring up Africa and your connection to Africa and you know, whether you consider yourself African American or only American or only African or whatever or Black. I'm like, you know, when we get to Black, because even sometimes I say to people, I'm like, we're talking about color, right? So if I go to like the most basic common color thing that we all have, which is like, you know, maybe say like a Crayola box and I take out my black crayon and my white crayon. I personally have never met any two people that I'm like, this reminds me of them, you know, it doesn't exist. So when I ask people, well, because there are people that are like, my skin is black. And some people are like, well, obviously my skin's not black, but, you know, I am black. My spirit is black. My culture, whatever. And I'm like, well, why? And, you know, at some point it's like, well, Africa. And I'm like, cool. So if you feel that connected and representative of Africa, why would there not be a plan to go actually see what it actually is? Like how many of us actually know versus what some rapper showed you or some movie, you know?
Right.
Exactly.
I think that's a very good, a very, very good point. And even then it makes me kind of like call into question my own.
Oh, I'm guilty.
Like, right. My own like viewpoint of like my like how I identify myself. Like I know, you know, I come from, my dad's side of the family is a slave family, so I know they're from somewhere in Africa. Where that is, I don't know, right? And I don't know that we'll ever know. So it's hard for me personally because, you know, I don't necessarily have a connection to Africa. And the connections that I do have from Africa are, I want to say ironically, I don't know if this is like the true form of irony or like the Alanis Morissette definition of irony. But my true connections to like Africa are from my study of like French through middle, high school, and college. So like I have plans to go to, you know, like go to Morocco, go to Algeria, go to pretty much like all of the like French colonies, because those are the countries that like I'm most familiar with through my study of French, which is also like weirdly kind of problematic in its own right. But that just goes to show you, right, that for a lot of Black people who don't necessarily have that strict like rooted connection to a place in Africa, that is sort of kind of our only experience with it. I mean, I also do really want to go to South Africa because, you know, I think it's a really gorgeous country. You know, I watched a lot of Disney Channel growing up, and oh man, there was one Disney Channel movie about this family, this Black family who had a like a foreign exchange student from South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds
It was
familiar.
like, yeah, it was like The Color of Something. Um, it was such a good movie, and she came, and it was like set like kind of right after apartheid ended.
Oh,
And it was about like this girl from, like, quite literally this white girl from South Africa, who like came and lived with a Black family, and like her coming to like, it was so bold. It was one of like, you watch, Disney Channel was ahead of its time back in our, I don't know, they were ahead of their time, but they like, she basically like had to come to grips with like her entire country's history of
yeah, it's a lot.
understanding of like Black people, and like colonialization of a Black populace. It was wild, but it was such a good movie. And I have always wanted to go there because of this Disney Channel movie.
Yeah,
And then I also, you know, I also really want to, I mean, I want to go to, I'm going to say Africa, like at large, the continent, because, you know, I don't know that we as Americans, and I say I don't know, but I know for a fact we as Americans don't have any concept of what like the true Africa is. You know, like when somebody
right.
says like, here, like, what is your first image of Africa? You think like, you know, tribal huts or like shanty towns. Like all I can think of are all of those like UNICEF commercials where it's like, you know, for 17 cents a day, less than a cup of coffee, you can help this poor, starving child that we're videotaping here. Look at this
Right.
child that we're videotaping rather than helping. Um, you can help this child in this terribly underdeveloped country in Africa, knowing full well that, you know, all of these countries are like, they have their own, they have economies, they have technology, they have all of these things. Like they're, most of these, I want to say, I say most because, you know, again, I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure the vast majority of these countries have like infrastructure and
Yeah,
exist on like a day-to-day basis, kind of like we do.
they're a lot richer than they portray, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think it'd be nice and interesting to go to be able to like,
yeah.
you
I
know,
mean, like
change our own viewpoint.
maybe three close friends, I would say, that are from Africa. One's from Ethiopia, one's from Cape Verde, and one's from I forget where he's from. But I'm like, I want the actual pure experience. So I'm like, I always tell them, when you're going, let me know like a
Because
year
I'll
in
go with
advance
you.
if you can. I'm 100% there, you know.
I also would love to go to Cape Verde
Right.
because
It's beautiful.
so this summer camp that I used to work for, just outside of Boston, Crossroads for Kids, incredible organization. If you are like, as a business owner or whatever, if you're looking for an organization or a company to donate to, Crossroads for Kids, in their main office is in Duxbury, Massachusetts. Highly, highly recommend. They do amazing work with kids and teens in the greater Boston area. But I would say a good portion of the kids that I worked with from there are from Cape Verde. And it took me so, again, you know, the things that you learn late in life that you probably should have known early on. Cape Verde, I learned was in, first of all, was learned it was in Africa. Had no idea because, you know, they speak Creole. So
Yep.
I'm thinking, you know, because my understanding of at that point, you know, I know like Haitian Creole, I know like Cajun, like Louisiana Creole. So I'm thinking, okay, so it must be a Caribbean island. And then I find out, oh, it's Africa. I'm so fascinated to be able to go there because as a kind of like a Portuguese French colony sort of
Yeah.
deal. And
Right.
also it's like, I don't know. It just like strikes me as this kind of like crazy tropical paradise where all the people are just like beautiful all the time
You have
for no
300
reason.
years, I know. It's the best
But
place.
that's my view of Cape Verde. So thanks for listening to that diatribe, everyone.
Yeah.
hope that inspires you.
Wow.
Oh man.
You know, but even just thinking, like you were saying, with the girl finding out all these things about her culture with this like rude awakening, even in trailing your history, like there's a pretty high chance that you know is probably in your family too.
Right.
And even if you take it to like skin color, not to sound racist or anything, but
you're gonna power through it.
I'm gonna power through it. I fit into the same mold. Like if you're not, at least to me, you know, if you're not super duper brown, you know, there's a pretty good chance there were some lighter skinned people in your genetics. You know, that's how genes work. And so, you know, when you really think about that, you know, some of those people.
Hello.
Maybe they own some people. You know, I don't know any other way to say it. So, you know, and unfortunately there were kind of like forced, you know, mingling of families and things like that during those times. So it's super possible. And, you know, that's one of the, I think, tough things that stops people from really exploring because they don't want to find out those sort of things. But you know, if you want to find your way back to Africa, you got to.
Right. Well, and you know, I think the important lesson to take from that, and this is, I think the thing that a lot of like our like white friends and colleagues are starting to experience and feel is that, and like, I think I don't want to speak for all Black people, but I know enough Black people to know that like we all kind of feel the exact same way, is that, you know, if so you do your 23andMe or your ancestry.com and find out that your family were slave owners, you know, it's like, we're not going to hold that against you. We know for a fact you didn't have anything to do with that, because pretty like, you know, last I checked, you were born after slavery. But all we collectively as Black people, I'm going to speak for all Black people here, but all we are, well, most of them, there are, you know, a select few that we're not going to speak for. We know who they are. We're not going to talk for them because.
Wow.
Anyway, all we are asking for from you as Black people, before I get sidetracked and go down that route, is that you actively work to dismantle the systems that your forebears put in place, while we work as Black people to overcome the obstacles that our ancestors had to deal with, and obstacles that we set up for ourselves as well. We just ask you do the same thing in kind. And that's really it. You know, you don't have to, like, nobody's asking you to apologize. I mean, like, should you? Like, yeah, sure, why not? Like, say, you know, I'm sorry that my family did this. I can't take it back, but I can work to make it better. That's quite, like, if that was the phrase that came out of like the collective white community, like if that was the phrase that came out of the collective white community's mouth today, I'm pretty sure things would get a lot better.
Right.
And then if something actually happened because of that statement, like, you know, work was actually done to make things better. Ooh.
Heads would explode.
Man, would we be in a good place?
Yeah, that's it. You know,
and then, you know, and that, you know, my goal is to have like one hot take or like, you know, church moment, and that is the hot take for today.
Amen.
no one is asking you to apologize for everything. We are just asking you to acknowledge it and work to dismantle the systems that were put in place.
Yep.
Yeah. Have you guys seen the documentary 13 on Netflix?
Oh, 13th. Yeah, about the 13th Amendment.
Yeah, that was a good.
Wild. So,
I have to watch it. I haven't watched
oh,
it.
it's so good. If you don't know anything about the 13th Amendment, basically it allows for it effectively is the amendment in the Constitution that enables the school to prison pipeline and effectively like indentured servitude, which, says that a person cannot be forced into labor unless it is the punishment of a crime. So it allows for, like chain gangs, basically. It legalizes, the use of prison labor or like free or reduced cost prison labor as a thing. And what demographic happens to be the largest percentage of incarcerated humans in the United States?
Dang.
Capita.
Yeah, and they even speak to how this prison system formed and it just being privatized and not really run by anybody that's
Stay tuned
running
to next week's episode of Next to the Floor, where we talk about the prison industrial complex and its impact on American society, and how states like Louisiana or Alabama, their entire economy is based not on, normal things like other states, but in fact, their entire economy is based on the prison system and their need to incarcerate people in order to sustain itself.
Mm-hmm.
But, my friends, with that, we come to the end of episode number 2 of Next to the Floor. Bjorn,
thank you so much, guys.
My nemesis,
Well,
the person who makes my everyday a living nightmare. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
It was so nice seeing your face, even though I saw you today because we worked together.
We did. Working hard.
It's so great to hear your thoughts and hear your questions. I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about you, just as a person, and again, I know that this is going to be on the internet and it will be there forever, so it's documented, is that you have just kind of like a serenity to everything you do and say. So I appreciate you for within the context of like this kind of like these conversations surrounding like Blackness and Black livelihood, having that kind of sense of serenity and stillness and calmness is so refreshing. And I think more people need to have that in their lives. So thank you so much for being here. Gary, thank you for just doing everything that you do. To all of our viewers at home who are watching, listening, learning, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison, and this has been Next to the Floor. Peace out. Goodbye. Bye.
Peace.